This learning object is a production of Abu Dhabi Men's College, Center of Excellence for ICT and Learning Technology.
Maybe I could ask Ambassador Elam Thomas, you've come to academia fairly recently, I believe. Do you think that colleges and universities, not only in the United States, but around the world, because you have experience having been posted around the world, do you think they're doing enough on their part to ensure that proper amounts of funding come in at a time when they're desperately needed?
Well, I think most of our societies recognize that if you invest in the education of your youth, in the long run, it is going to be far more beneficial. You will not have such a drain on what we call in the United States the entitlements. There is also the concern about a moral commitment to educating the young people to improve the quality of life. It sounds terribly idealistic, but I can honestly say that when you do make that kind of improvement at the very early stages of one's development, you see the benefits almost overnight. You see a society that is going to be able to make reasoned decisions and not fall into the morass that we are in today because they were not able to understand how you make financial planning, how you become financially literate. There are societies around the world that have done somewhat of a better job than the United States, to be very honest with you. And this gives me the opportunity to say in a setting as this, the importance of exposing people from one culture to another so that they learn that we don't have a corner on the market on the resolution of any of these crises. We may have been at the beginning, but through the educational process and investing money therein, you will succeed in turning this around.
Good, thank you. Charles Raymond, let me ask you from your perspective, you were at a very large foundation once upon a time. Do you think that foundations are going to be able to step up to the plate now, perhaps even with more money than they might have come up with beforehand?
Well, certainly as far as corporate foundations go, they have cut back dramatically. Some of the larger private foundations, like the Gates Foundation, Hewlett Packard, and others, have actually are going to give more than the required 5% that they have to give of their corpus in the United States. I think what is really important is that there's an opportunity now to really collaborate between governments and businesses, collaborate between individuals, governments, and businesses, and tremendous opportunities there to really make a difference. And as an example, if you look at what Mohammed Yunus is doing with this whole idea of social businesses and the whole theory of blended value, where you both can make a profit and also do social good, which is really critical to be able to combine those two things. And so I see a lot less money being used, but a lot more focus. And certainly many of the organizations that I'm familiar with, which are foundations mainly, have begun to focus their money more on education and putting that money towards helping students not only get into college, but helping them stay in college. Whereas the Gates Foundation, a year ago, for the last 3 or 4 years, have focused very heavily on the whole idea of small schools. And that has turned out to not be quite as successful as everybody had thought. Now they're beginning a approach to look at how do you keep kids who graduate from high school and get into college in college. I mean, kids can get into college, but how do you keep them there? And most of our statistics is how many kids graduate from high school. But now many of the organizations, the one that I work for as well, are focusing much more on how to keep kids in college and keep them productive.
Dr. Goodman, I'm wondering whether the globalization of education and in particular of higher education, does that create greater opportunities for transfers of funds, fundraising, and things like that?
It sure makes it possible to widen access to higher education as a new generation, a much larger generation of qualified college students comes on the market and needs places to go. And if you look at the past 50 years, with respect to international education, there were only two periods when there was a dip in people doing it. One was after the Iranian Revolution, because Iranian students were the biggest foreign student group in any country, especially in ours. And secondly, after 9/11. And the good news about this economic crisis is it's neither of those. So I expect more students will find more ways to have access. Today, about 4% of international students in America go to community colleges. I think that number is going to substantially increase. And about half of international students in America go to just 150 colleges and universities. We have 4,000 that are accredited. So there is room if we better distribute both the information and the students.
Good, good. Let's go back to the front line of this challenge in southern Utah. What's your perspective on the dangers ahead and opportunities ahead, Dr. Benson?
Well, to Dr. Goodman's point about there are a lot more universities out there, I certainly hope students here will consider Southern Utah as an option. There's an unabashed plug.
It's an incredibly beautiful part of the country.
It's a beautiful part of the country. Dr. Adams mentioned on the previous panel the Moral Land Grant Act of 1862, and the fact that in the United States, one of our darkest moments in history, we invested in a piece of legislation that had this unbelievable impact on states. But then, in 1862 and subsequently, there's a further Land Grant Act of 1890 that helped create some of the traditionally black colleges. I also take as an example the GI Bill. In 1944, signed into law that gave access to almost 8 million veterans to education where they heretofore would never had that opportunity. Of all the things that are in the stimulus package, the one which gladdened me the most, and from which I took the most, I think, optimism was the fact that President Obama and his colleagues chose to invest almost $16 billion in Pell Grants. And that translates into students, into opportunities, into access. And I believe there's real cause for hope for the future.
That's a very good point. I think in the I'm trying to remember the exact name of the bill, the Economic Recovery Act, basically. At one point, there was $150 billion that was for education universally within the United States. I think it ended up being a figure closer to $100 billion. But that again probably helps make the point that you're making about times of crisis do not necessarily mean, it's not necessarily bad news for those of you who are in higher education. I hope we can have some thoughts and some questions from the audience. We have people with microphones hanging around in the aisles. Who would like to ask a question? Oh, right there in the third or fourth row. Thank you. And maybe you could please just identify yourself and then go ahead.
Okay, my name is Bassam Khatib. I am a computer teacher from Al-Ain Women's College, HCT. Good afternoon, all of you. With respect, I want to ask you, how can we transfer your vision to our students, and how can we make our students feel safe about the future? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Maybe we could go back to Dr. Chan. What about your students? How would you convey that to them?
I think it's very important to be able to provide students the ability to dream and to have a dream and to be able to understand what a college education might do for them. So in the case of our students or your students, I think we spend a great deal of time way before they get to university or college to talk to them about what college life is about and how that dream can be part of their family's dream for themselves. And in many, many cultures, that's very important. So I would urge us to work very much from the very beginning of early childhood before they get to college. And it's a seamless kind of road for children. And I think that we can't do it when they get to us. We have to begin that dream very early on. So I'm not sure that that's directly related to your question, but really see that as a lifetime of development and a society that puts a great deal of emphasis on how those dreams help fulfill a society's dream.